Welcome, humans. Let's all play American Woolette. Russian roulette is a name given to games of suicide, in which you spin a chamber on a revolver and you play this game with a single bullet in that 5 or 6 chamber revolving cylinder. American Woolette is also a game of suicide, but unlike Russian roulette, which is a game of individual actions, American Woolette is a game of civilization level suicide, okay? Civilization level collapse. And we're all playing. You have no option. You're playing, you were born here at this time, you chose to participate through that act of being born here, in spite of any denials you may make, in spite of any assertions to the contrary. You're playing because you wanted to play, because you wanted to be here. And here we all are, we're playing American Woolette. And there's moving parts, there's revolving, there's chance of us making a fatal mistake of pulling a trigger and having the chamber loaded at the time we do that. And it's not a game for wimps, you know. So we're here now, and we're playing American Woolette. Now, American Woolette has, like Russian roulette, has an activity, a part of it, in which one places monetary bets, and as well as betting your life. You know, it's a dual situation, right? And so American Woolette here has bets being placed on civilization degrading. And so, as an example, we've got civilization up here, and then here's all of the abstractions that you go through before you get down to Mad Max world. And I personally think Mad Max was mild. It wasn't much of an apocalypse, really. It's not the apocalypse the way that Americans are going to do apocalypse. Civilization collapse. We're going to be good at it. We're going to be epic at it. So you get all the way down. This is collapse. So this is collapse over here. This is our collapse line. And this is which ones we make our bets on, right? And so we're betting on collapse as we bet into each of these things here. We're betting that at some point civilization will level out. Some of us are. Some of us think it's all going to go all the way down to Mad Max. And there's kickers in on there's I don't know, enhancements to American Woolette that Russian roulette doesn't have. Of course, ours is done civilization-wide, so we're really doing it big. You know, go big or go home. But beyond that, there's a few kickers in there, and we'll get into those too. But so in our collapse scenario, you could bet that, oh, okay, I'm gonna bet that the collapse will not happen, and so I'll buy into the idea of a digital yuan or a digital dollar. Which is basically system money, right? So if you do that, you think the system's going to be pretty stable with the clucktards in charge, and you're just going to stick with the system money and you're good with that because you know your life will be covered because the system's going to remain as it is. And you have faith in that system, and it's always protected you and it's gotten you this far without too many bangs or bumps or whatever. And so you think, okay, I'm good with it. Fine. Give me that digital yuan. Let me go off and drink beer, chase women, whatever, you know? Or you think, existing system, got some wrinkles in it. Got some big oscillations going on. Got some weirdnesses that we can't understand. Things don't make sense. Communists are running around. communism is not a good sign, right? Okay, communism is, unlike the people that think they practice it and think that they believe it, communism is not an ideology, all right? I've done extensive research, and if you go and read about Karl Marx, not what he wrote, but about him, you'll see that what I'm about to tell you is perfectly factual. That communism was a designed mental op. It's a designed mind control op. The power elites in Marx's time paid Marx and made a contract with him, and he wrote Das Kapital and the whole, all of the treats, all of the primers for Marxism, what we call Marxism, but communism. And he did it in a very specific formulaic process. And it's an initiation process, reading through the books. It's actually designed to do mental programming in you and all of this kind of stuff, so that you'll end up becoming a Marxist, what we call a Marxist. You'll become an adherent to his thinking by the time you get through these massive tomes that he put out at the behest of the power elite. Now, bear in mind, Karl Marx was in no way a Marxist, right? He didn't believe any of the things that he wrote. He died an elitist. He lived as an elitist. He was what we would call an elitist, you know, scum-sucking elitist, really. He's every bit as bad as Jeffrey Epstein, especially in that particular area. So Karl Marx was not a good guy. Marxism and communism spread out, and we've had it all throughout the planet, but there's one thing that is true about it. It is not an organic ideology. It's not something that has arisen. So you can make a statement that constitutional relations between any people in a government derive from and can be traced back ultimately to the individual contract of a primal family, right? And that's where all of the rules for all of the participants in any constitutional contract come from. It comes from family. Marxism is not like that. It was designed and structured. Marxism, communism, is a tool of the globalist elites. It always has been. And it's their tool that they put into people's mind in order to be able to control them, because the people that have that mind worm placed in there are no longer essentially under their own control. They no longer have free will because they accept things that are inimical to free will. Communism, as a tool of the globalist elite, is being expressed now. This means that the globalists are on the move again, okay? And they're trying to do something, because communism is to a globalist like a shovel is to a boiler loader, right? He's got to have that shovel moving in order to flip the coal into the boiler. Otherwise, he can't work. The globalists have to be shoveling communism in order to move people. That's how that's always been done in the past. And you can see this through even pre-Bolshevik revolution, but certainly from the Bolshevik revolution all the way through Cuba, South America, Asia, etc., right? Now it's America. Now it's North America. Now it's our turn. They're trying to shovel the communism in on us. This means that the globalist elite are in the process of trying to change our social order to suit their needs and to suit their goals. That changing is what is telling me that we're playing American roulette right now. The fact that they're shoveling the communism again means that we're on that path. We're the target at this point, just like Vietnam, just like Korea, just like China, like Russia, Albania, Czechoslovakia, Austria. So you see where I'm going, right? It always fails, but it is a globalist tool that causes great upheaval and heartache and damage, death, and destruction, and globalist profit. They always make out. It always fails. It always leaves the globalists in charge. And at that point, you have fascism. And so now, because they're trying it on such a huge level, because they're trying it across all of Europe, they're trying it in England, they're trying it in New Zealand, they're trying it in Australia, and they're trying it in the United States and Canada, all at the same time. So they're stretched pretty thin. So aside from my strategic analysis of, or my analysis of their strategy and its failures and its timing, we're still nonetheless playing American roulette. Now, the big out is what I'm calling it, the big out, okay? The big out is where we get out and we discuss as adults all the stuff that the globalists and their minions are trying to hide. Arizona, Georgia, all of these states, their audits, right? If the vote was fair and free and Biden won, and we have a few unsettled minds, then why the hell is anybody objecting to those unsettled minds settling their anxiety over whether or not it was free, fair, and honest, right? So they're doing things, along with shoveling out communism, they're doing things at an exceptional level that keeps piling on and making them look more and more and more guilty. Even some of the normies are starting to wise up relative to this. Once the normies really start cluing into it, then we get into American roulette at a very serious level. And you're going to have to decide where you're going to want to place your bets on the whole roulette syndrome, right? The whole system. Does the system survive? If it doesn't survive, at what point will it stabilize, right? Or won't it? So down here, there's no bets, right? So if the system crashes, and for instance, the cheat, the big out comes on, and we all see and we all discuss the giant cheat of the elections, and we all dig in and change it and make it fair and so on. That alters everything, and the globalists start their system starts, their globalist system starts cracking and decaying and so on its own. Otherwise, they're going to manipulate us with their system if it were able to be survivable and sustainable. I do not see that that's the case. I think we're playing American roulette. I think that everybody is, there are a lot of the people within the mainstream are saying the system is solid, keep with it, as long as you have confidence in it, it'll keep going, maintain, believe the illusion, believe the illusion, believe the illusion. Well, a lot of us don't believe the illusion. We look at the reality and we're living in it. And so we've got to make a decision with our energies and stuff as to where we think the system will stabilize. Now, these bets need not be mutually exclusive, right? And so this is basically why it's laid out this way. This is as civilization marches out of chaos, it goes up through to abstractions. And you can only have cryptos and digital yuan and this kind of stuff as abstractions running in controlling to some extent, but providing the liquidity for your civilization if you're fairly stable, right? You don't have cryptos in Mad Max world. Nobody in Mad Max world is trading cryptos or firing up computers. So you got to decide, where are we going to stabilize? Where are we going to end up here? But like I say, it's not mutually exclusive. You can say, okay, well, we're degrading. And so if I were an investor kind of guy, I would say, okay, as a personal philosophy or plan, I'm going to just say, I don't know where it's going to stabilize, but I'm going to bet on it as best I can for the whole way down. So I'll get cryptos, I'll get physical cash, I'll get gold and silver, I'll buy some real estate, and I'll get to these in a second, and I'll get some lead, just bullets, lead, food, and I'll have something for mobility. So I'll be able to survive Mad Max world if it gets that bad, right? Now, this is the sort of the smart way. You hedge your bets. You spread all of your energies out over a range, and then wherever the range settles, as the range starts settling in, this is woo mind again, as the system starts collapsing and starts recovering and collapsing and recovering and collapsing and starts stabilizing, you can say, oh, okay, well, it's going to be all right. I'm not going to have to buy any more bullets. We're not going to get that bad. We're going to stabilize off of physical cash, cryptos, real estate, etc. Because bear in mind, basically, all of these things right here are bets that are against the digital yuan and digital dollar. This is a bet where the system controls everything, including your life, because they can inject you whenever they want, decide, okay, we don't need these millions of people here, terminate them now, turn off their chip, and 2 days later they all die, that sort of thing, right? Because that's where all of this heads. That's the ultimate transhumanism goal. That's all of this Satanism, elitism, it's, death worship and all of that kind of weird shit. Yet another snake cult. And so that's the system as we stand. Now, it is not standing. That's the thing. That's why you're watching this video. You're aware that the system is collapsing. And so you've come to want to come and see about the rules and some strategies for playing American Woolette. Now, American Woolette is not like any other Russian Woolette, which is personal and individual. American Woolette is basically systemic. It's also civilization-wide. So we're talking about our whole civilization going down here. Now, civilization is composed of the bazillions of actions of bazillions of individual people acting out of their own interest and being aggregated into some kind of collective momentum in something that can be determined as a generalized direction, right? It's an abstraction. It's still individual actions, constantly, continually. And so individual actions will matter, do matter, and they matter more now than they have in the past, because we used to have a system that did not include this level of visible thinking being out there. It was there, but it was hidden, and we were basically just working on the petrodollar and all of this kind of stuff, and it was sort of okay. People could travel around, there was abuse, there was all of this, but now the grit, the backside uncleanliness, the dirt is coming out and being exposed, and it's like, we don't like a lot of that. Once they unleashed communism, the power elites are not able to control it, right? So it will turn on them, and there is much there to expose, and there is much damage to be exposed to the communists themselves from the power elites. And personally, I think that they'll go and basically eat the rich. We're going to get to that level in this stage, right up in this top stage of the collapse. And there's many scenarios here, right? But okay, but in an absolute undifferentiated, individuated world where we're just looking at things as a generalized abstraction of average or something, it makes sense to be thinking about these kind of things and to get yourself some bullets and some food and some mobility, right? I don't know where you would go, but in case there's, waves of refugees or something sweeping through your area, maybe you can get ahead of it. If there's fire, if there's actual, what they call kinetic war here, if, people are throwing bombs at each other and that kind of shit, you move, you get out of the way of that shit. But you're going to need to have food, and you're going to, and some level of other stuff here, and you'll also need to have some level of protection for that, right? And projectile weapons are the best thing to have. So get yourself some bullets and some lead. Another thing you may want to have is you may want to have some place to go to. And so real estate, if we collapse and hover down into here, this is like surf level, right? This is just actually individual survival level. We can just call that homesteads. So real estate would be homesteads. So this is not So this is not real estate as an investment. This is real estate where you can go and live on it, right? Where you got a pond or a creek and you can maybe do a little fishing and that kind of thing. Or you're on the coast and you can do a little fishing there, or you're in the mountains and you can do some hunting, and maybe you can have some livestock and grow some food and basically subsist. So that would be subsistence. When everybody subsists, ultimately what happens is that you have people that arise that are like myself, that are paranoids, and they're physically fit, and their paranoid and all paranoids feel anxious if they can't control their environment, right? And so they will ultimately do things to protect their environment, even to the point of forming groups and taking over the groups, the control of the groups, basically becoming a clan, a leader of a clan or a mini warlord, just to protect their environment, just so they don't feel anxious all the time, right? And so this is how it starts, and we build out. And thus all of the rules, for instance, and the laws that I was saying all relate to the derivation of family, constitutional kind of thing. It's all contracts. That's where all of this stuff comes from. It's not communism, which is basically force. You know, we're a mob of 30 people. You can't fight all of us all at once. And so we're going to force you to do what we want. And this is the struggle sessions. This is all of the globalist tools. And that's what we're facing here. So now the real estate we're talking about is a homestead kind of thing. It's subsistence. But if we stabilize here, it's a long way back up. Gold and silver represent our intermediate level of exchange. You work and you dig a bunch and you get a bunch of gold. You go to the trouble of getting a fire going. You chop the wood, all of that. You refine it. You melt it. It's shiny. You can get women with it. You know, there are people want it, have it. There's a reason they feel that there's reason to have it. It has some utility, but it's basically a means of storing calories and trading calories without actually having to lug along bushels of wheat or, you know, a half-dead seal to trade or something like that, right? So physical gold and silver represents a different stage of stabilization in which we'll still have like national trade. Not necessarily fast national trade by any means. You will have a lot of reasonably decent local trade, and you'll probably get to the point where you have multiple different forms of representational currency. Bear in mind that physical cash is merely representational currency. It represents gold and silver. Gold and silver represent calories. And that's just the way of our universe. And so we may invent, if we stabilize here, we'll end up in, next thing we'll have to do is invent physical cash. Now, if we stabilize from gold and silver upwards, the recovery is fairly fast because we know how to do this. We've done this shit before. We've got a bunch of machinery lying around. As soon as we can make sure we got electricity at a decent rate, we can start doing things with it, right? And so this right here, any of this area right up in here represents basically a limp along until we can get better, make a way until we can make it the way, and so on. It's basically a way of recovery. So the collapse scale is also a stabilization and a recovery scale. Now, we know that we need recovery, and we know we need the recovery, and because we've been beat down, our societies, the Chinese are actually claiming that they've won the first battle in the world's first biological war with release of COVID, with the deliberate release of COVID, the spike proteins, and that America is defeated now, knocked in our place, kicked down. And they're not wrong on a lot of levels. Anyway, though, so, but the recovery thing here includes, you know, going from gold to physical cash and to cryptos and so on. We don't ever need to go back to a digital yuan. We don't ever need to go back to a centralized system. That's entirely for the benefit of the elites. It does nothing. The bank system does nothing for individual humans. It is a tax upon individual humans. It is a rake off of all of our labor and provides it into the hands of people that have not earned it and do bad things and unjust things with it. And they're able to aggregate off of all of us such masses of money that they end up in control, and thus we find ourselves where we're at now. They manage this system very badly because they're assholes and greedy fucktards, and they always inevitably only bring it to the point of collapse, and it collapses again. Now we're becoming educated in larger numbers. We do not have to go back to that route. We can settle in on something less than that route as we build back. And, by the way, we're going to have these kickers, these Magic mushrooms, literally and figuratively and allegorically and metaphorically, intrude on our process, this time that had not existed in previous collapses engineered by the political elite crowd, right? And so in our version of American Woolette, we don't have a single chamber loaded, that kind of stuff. All the chambers are loaded. Anytime that hammer comes down, it's got to find a live round. It just doesn't matter timing at all, because we're in a situation where the live rounds are going to do damage continually as soon as let loose, and it's part of a cascade. The reason all of this is happening is because of the poor management of the poorly educated, self-absorbed, greedy managers, the managerial class, the enemy class, over these last 200, 300, 400 years. Now, I'm not proposing that we'll end up with Mad Max world, and I actually am saying that we'll end up with a situation where, because of lots and lots and lots of people, we are into cryptos and all of this kind of stuff, right? And we have alternatives to their centralized. The alternatives to their centralized mean that we can all opt out. The ease with which we can opt out is helping to collapse their system, but it's also helping to strengthen these layers here of our abstraction, of our civilization, such that we need not collapse through them and down to this in order to rebuild. Anyway, that's my thinking on this, that our version of American Woolette is going to be played out over these next few months very dramatically, with our magic mushrooms showing up from outer space, the UFOs, the potential for space aliens, and that stuff is going, the space aliens and so on, is going to change the system narrative. So the system money collapsing and the communism it's supporting as a tool of the elite in their attempt to drive us into this digital currency system is actually going to be one of the first casualties of our upcoming alien experience, okay? Now, curiously, those people that would have us go into the digital currencies where we're entirely vulnerable as individuals and collectively to the whims of the power elite and evil actors that would control that system are under attack themselves right at the moment in a way they've not been, I don't know, maybe ever. And probably it's because there's some paranoids planning things. But we've got some things here that, as I say, we've got some kickers that are going to intrude on all of this. And these kickers include the UFOs and space aliens. And they also include our friend COVID. Now, the reason that, we'll get back to that in a minute, but the reason that it includes COVID is because the vaccine, the mRNA product, the mRNA vax has a real potential for bringing fulfillment to forecast language from the old Alta reports about the third wave, about the third winter, okay? And the thing is that the data sets had the sun disease forming back maybe as early as 2008. No, actually, it was earlier than that. I think we actually had the first written part of it was maybe 2003. and that's, anyway, I won't go into that, go into some small details about this upcoming third wave. Within the data sets, we had a third wave description in which there were a lot of victims, in which a lot of people died. And it was the end of the sun disease for humanity at that point. But it was the end after some horrific level of casualties. And we face that now, not directly from the COVID, but from a combination of COVID and the mRNA vax. So it's the combination of these two that's going to be killing people this coming winter. And what's going to happen is and what is projected to happen, and the reason I bring it up is that it's now coming out as projections from people with reasonably accurate computer models. I distrust computer models mainly all the time because I've done software and I know how that shit works. And people don't. They take it as factual or whatever, and there's a huge level of error in any and every computer model. So in any event, though, in these computer models that are coming on out now, that's talking about, these are dealing with the effective joining of COVID and the mRNA vaxxed people into a death wave that was predicted as part of the globalist depopulation. It is horrific. It'll include lots of children that have been vaccinated because they were vaccinated with this mRNA vax, and that will fulfill the language that was forecast around the sun disease. And then thereafter, we don't have to worry about it. It's still out and about in the wild, but it's basically an occasional incidence kind of thing happening, not a consistency that we have to deal with. It fades very rapidly. But this third wave, should it materialize, because see, there's the rub. The linguistic process, predictive linguistics, predicts language appearing in general discourse, not the events necessarily. Language frequently is a poor representation of what actually occurred. Humans are not good eyewitnesses, and they're bad in reporting. There's ambiguity in language. The underlying meaning and emotional tone of language changes constantly, so that you have a rapidly moving target in which you're trying to look at it, and the background is moving as well, and you're bouncing up and down. So the language is never an exact representation of what's going to occur, and we do get very good hits out of the process that I invented back in the 90s for language that will show up, but not necessarily an understanding of the meaning of the events that are propelling that language at the time that it is showing up, because there's this large temporal gap, and all these changes have occurred in the nature of the language along the way. But the language that in the Alta reports relative to the sun disease were showing that we would be, we'd enter a period where there'd be this third wave. It would be rather deadly, and then we were done with that aspect of this. But there's people now in Britain that are saying 60 to 70% of the people that have been vaccinated will become extremely ill, debilitated, and or die this coming winter. Now, I think that this is going to occur because we're going to have an extremely harsh winter and lots of cloud cover, and there's going to be no incidental vitamin D production to speak of. And so you will really need to maintain vitamin D levels. Another thing about this is, it's my understanding at this point that vitamin D does provide a significant level of protection from the spike protein as well as from the coronavirus. But the level of protection is dependent on that you maintain an optimal level of vitamin D, which we're all saying now is in the range of 80 to 90 nanograms per milliliter in blood. I have it up here as 40, and we're just going to change that to 90. 90 nanograms per milliliter as the optimal. Now bear in mind that indigenous humans now who live out in the sun most of the day for most of their lives will routinely test by Western assay methods, blood draw, in the range of 120 to 150 nanograms per milliliter. So you're safe at 90. 80 to 90, 60 is the low end of safe now, and optimal is thought to be up in as close to 90 as you can get. So, you know, more sunbathing, sun those balls, guys. This could be acutely necessary when we get into the situation this coming winter, as we get into the ice age conditions that will bring in larger cloud masses, longer lasting cloud masses, and longer lasting low pressure systems drawing in more clouds over larger areas, reducing sunlight for so many people that incidental vitamin D production simply doesn't exist to speak of. And it may even become difficult in the summer. Now, I'm out here on the coast in the end of May, and it is basically still, for us, near winter conditions, not really spring conditions. There's a lot of plants that are late setting bud. Even the native plants like the grasses on the beach are only now starting to get into flower where they should have done it 2 months ago. And so they're all reacting to the conditions we have here. And I'm quite certain that my ability to generate vitamin D from our low sunlight is basically non-existent at this point. And so I sip my chaga tea all day long. Chaga is loaded with vitamin D. I don't count on chaga as my only vitamin D source, though, and do supplement, because those dangerous fuckers, the powers that be, have let out communism in the form of COVID, and they're trying to, you know, trash the society for their own ends because we're getting too uppity and too knowledgeable. There's too many of us catching on. That's basically what's happening, right? So, the thing to do, like I say, is to just understand where we're at here, and that we're going to get these magic mushrooms that intrude in our collapse process, which is this American Woolette, where the woo is going to overwhelm the system, and then we're left in a mist where we're going to have to decide the shape of that coming future, and everything will be unknown. So everybody's participation is required, because we need all the work to shape out that future as to what we're going to live, because we're basically going to, I think, get rid of all of these elitists over the course of the next few years. I think they let out the communism monster, and it's going to turn around. It's going to find huge resistance from the populace, and it's going to turn around, and the only people that will be able to consume will be the people that created it. And then we'll just come along with our brooms and sweep up all of the mess and put it into big sacks and take it over to the landfill, and we'll just be done with all that. But that'll take us a number of years, right? So now, as we progress forward into this systemic collapse and have the system collapse around us, we stand, we just let the system collapse around us, and then we decide where we're going to settle on and pick it up and go back. As this occurs, we've got real dangers we have to face. Okay, the spike protein is 3 folded proteins that are joined to a central stem, and this was done in a lab. Each of these 3 folded proteins is a prion. A prion will cause brain malfunction. And so people with spike proteins in them are going to contribute to our general degradation, because their brains will be malfunctioning continually, constantly, getting worse over the next couple of years. These are people that have had the spike proteins injected into them, or however they've gotten them into them. I don't think exposure to people that are vaccinated and thus are shedding the spike protein is necessarily an infection of a non-vaccinated person. I think it is exposure. So at this point, I'm treating exposure to vaccinated people as though I'm being exposed to an irritating, caustic kind of a dust, right? Something that is irritating my system. It's caustic in the sense that it's potentially damaging, and it's dust-like, hopefully, in the sense that if I get away from that environment and clean my system out, I no longer suffer the effects. So far, we seem to have evidence that that is the case. If you physically isolate yourself from vaccinated people when they're in active shedding mode, we don't know what determines that, you will be able to get some relief from the symptoms that you get around them. So, so this is a dangerous fucking world at the moment, and our Woolette has gotten even more dangerous because these power elitists have let out communists and the COVID, and neither one of which can be controlled. But we can live in spite of both of them until we deal with the situation that allowed both of them to arise. And that's basically what we're going to end up doing here. And as I say, it'll take us a number of years. The death rate proposed by the UK computer models, or illness rate of 60 to 70% with a corresponding very high death rate. So if you read down into the study, they're saying 70% of the people might get very, very, very ill, and of that 70%, half may die, projected to die. So we're looking basically at, if we were to achieve, this is the curious part of all of this, if we were to just buy into the powers that be, Biden and all of his crowd, and try and everybody go out and get the vax, and we are trying to achieve 70% of our population vaccinated by the 4th of July, according to Biden. That's his goal. And they have bullshit reasons for this, but it's all bullshit. But curiously, if we were to achieve 70%, and we're only at 48% theoretically, or claimed. The powers that be are claiming 48% of the United States has been vaccinated. I don't buy it. But in any event, so they're claiming 48% now, and they want to get to 70%. But if we were at 70%, then we had half of those die. Curiously, we would be very close to the projected die-off numbers from some of these reports, from some of these military intelligence groups for the United States. So it's, as I say, it's curiouser and curiouser as we go forward that there's all of this stuff piling up, all, pointing to conspiracy people and conspiracies as being actual and factual, and no longer any theories, right? So we've got us a giant plandemic. We've got the powers that be trying to kill us off on a global depopulation through that plandemic. We've got stolen elections. All of these are claimed conspiracy theories, right? And of course, we've also got the ultimate claimed conspiracy theory showing up, UFOs. And it's like UFOs, they have acknowledged, they're selling it. The space aliens are even starting to be discussed by officialdom. So you know the shit's coming unglued. You know that we're in American Woolette in the final rounds where we're going to pull the lever and see who's got an empty chamber or what the hell's going on, right? This is our systemic collapse, as goofy as it is right now. And our systemic collapse is going to be, have aliens sprinkled in it. I'm open to it. This is cool. This is going to be great. I think it's going to, so here's my thinking, right? I think the powers that be have really, really, really fucked up. They've fucked up because none of these communism, COVID, or UFOs can be controlled. So the powers that be can't control BLM and the other communists. They can't control the COVID and what's going to happen there. And they can't control what's going to happen with the space aliens. But they've unleashed it. They've let them all out. And so we're into Woolette. We've got some really screwy times ahead of us. And we are mere days, mere days from very major changes to the social order that will ripple on forever. Now, and also, by the way, anybody that watches this that doesn't understand we're in collapse, I would invite them to consider, toilet paper last year, chips now, price of oil, the price of money, all of these things. So it's here now. It really is. We're getting into it now. It is conceivable that a movement or a self-organizing collective, let's call it that, okay? It is conceivable that a self-organizing collective, gotta know where your socks are, guys, okay? It's conceivable that a self-organizing collective knows all of the shit I'm telling you here and has known about it and has been thinking about it for decades. It's conceivable that the self-organizing collective knew in 2017 when they started releasing the Navy UFO information that we would be here now, more or less, some weird shit going on, because they knew what the globalist elite were going to do, and so we're making counter moves ahead of that, and so on. So it's conceivable that this self-organizing collective has things, plans, initiatives, thoughts, things in place, set up, such that much of the degradation, much of the Woolette game is now rigged, right? Or much of the Woolette episode we're in is now rigged. That there was a design, that design is going to basically have us stabilize with all of this, right? Well, not the communism part, but we'll have to deal with the COVID. But it's conceivable that this self-organizing collective did things years back, and then that years back trail of events led to this event here where they were releasing about the UFOs that actually occurred. They released it in 2017. Curiously, timing-wise, go and look, that same winter, shortly after something that happened in October, at the very last day of October. Anyway, they released this information of UFOs, and it was really, the UFO information was about UFO stuff that had happened, previous decade. And it was all basically designed. There was this trail of events that led to the release of this information. That information in 2017 is now had its own trail of events that have led to us now on the cusp of UFO disclosure. And you got people that are saying, oh, all UFOs are good, like batshit crazy Greer, who has no evidence whatsoever and is obviously not human. Because, I mean, he's a nice guy and everything. I'm just ragging on him. He really is human. But humans have this thing in them called xenophobia. Xenophobia is placed in us by universe. It begins with an X, X-E-N-O, phobia. And xenophobia means fear of the other, someone not like ourselves, right? And so xenophobia is at the root of slavery and racism. In between humans, interhumanity, okay? Because a black person doesn't look like a Native American person who doesn't look like, an Inuit who doesn't look like me. And so we get paranoid. We don't know what's going on here. They don't look like me. So we all have xenophobia. And xenophobia is among those traits that have been identified as a key survival skill, key survival trait that is built into us by universe for us to survive. And so xenophobia is your friend. Xenophobia is your friend because it will keep you alive. It will help you be able to tell the good space aliens from the bad space aliens, that kind of shit, right? I think xenophobia is going to be up-leveled And so personally, I think that the space aliens are going to take racism out of the picture, because we will all be racist, xenophobic versus the space aliens, and not so much versus ourselves anymore, right? And so we'll recognize all humans as cousins in a way that we have not prior to the space aliens showing up here. Now, xenophobia is good. And Greer, Dr. Greer, who's saying that all space aliens are good and we're a bunch of wackadoodles for thinking that there could ever be an aggressive space alien race, is denying the xenophobia that universe put in him. I'm going to go with universe, right? Until there's proof that until we encounter a few dozen races and we don't have any issues with them, and that we see that they're not in any way aggressive or so on, I'm not going to say that there's a general trend, right, in that direction. Obviously, humans are aggressive fuckers, and we're predators and so on and so on. So we need to examine universe in an open mind, and in that open mind, we need to keep our xenophobia right where it belongs, in my opinion. But anyway, so our self-organizing collective, I think that our self-organizing collective, hypothetically, has plans, resources, and materiel in place. They've got nothing better to do. Civilization is collapsing. So it's not like there's real work out there. You got to let that shit collapse. So you might as well do all this stuff in anticipation of that collapse and get yourself ready. And so I think our civilization is in this, what I'm calling the American Woolette, because it's America's driving it. It's all happening here. The power elites are going to be undone here. They're going to be dislodged here. We're doing it now by firmness, by resolve, by even temperament, by not being screeching activist communists, but by evenly pushing back and corralling the aberrant. And I actually think we're doing it. That is to say, we're in this time now. So the events that led to the episodes in 2017 of unveiling in so many different areas, UFOs among them, have reached their culmination. Okay, so there is no coincidence, none, that all kinds of messaging would stop when it was finished, when there was no longer a need for that kind of thing, and events were so imminent that you couldn't get ahead of them in the little gap there, right? And so we know the events that are imminent include the UFOs, not necessarily space aliens right away, but we're in all of this right now. And I do not think that the space alien shit is or was in any way participatory in the as a distraction in the audits, in the voting audits, because it was begun so long ago, long before, it was begun in decades past. These events are now taking shape, and the timing is not in the control of the deep state. And in fact, we know this, and you'll see further evidence here very shortly, because the deep state's players, Biden et al., will try and derail what's going to come in June. And they'll try and deny it and degrade it and put it in its little box, and maybe we'll all forget about it and put it away. They don't want UFO disclosure any further than it is, and they're rather upset with what's been coming out in recent months, and they're trying to get ahead of that. So I'm quite certain that that is not participating as a distraction for the audits, and nor do I actually think that it will be that distracting at that time, and that we'll all see in July when a lot of this shit comes together, that it was necessary that we also have this at this time that we're going through and playing the rest of American Woolette. Because we're going to play American Woolette whether the UFO and space alien guys come out or not. But for all of us individuals, it will be much better to have these guys in all of their unknown and potentially frightening aspect here now out in the open when this is going down, okay? And that's because I'm quite convinced that there is a self-organizing collective, and it does know that myself, that all of us, that you are all playing American Woolette, and that this self-organizing collective knows that this is anything but a game.